back, everyone. I think there we are, live again here from Brussels, and welcome back also to our in-person audience here at our networking 2022 Summit for EIT Manufacturing. Hope you've all had a good break and are ready to attack our second session. And certainly what we're hearing here in Brussels is that the return to the face-to-face networking is really not only welcome, but crucial to forging those important connections and relationships that will serve for partnerships later on. So everybody here in Brussels is enjoying that, and I guess all we can hope for is the next time that we can go completely physical, although I know EIT Manufacturing has done a lot of physical events this year. But good to know that the networking opportunities are appreciated. Just a quick question before we carry on, because I'll remind our virtual audience that you can put your questions in the chat function, which is at the top right-hand of your screen on the Hop-In platform, and for anything else or other questions that you may have, if you need assistance, you can use the FAQ function, and that should be quite self-explanatory there, how to find that. So it's time for our second roundtable discussion: circular economy and energy sourcing, collaboration and new partnerships across the value chain. You saw that in the opening video. And we'd like to go further into the practicalities of transitioning from a make, take, replace model to a more circular one. And taking into account, of course, that no one can make all of these necessary changes alone. Collaboration is absolutely key here. So for this session, we have 4 panelists up on stage this time. I'd like to welcome you all, and I'll welcome them by name now. And we also have a couple of activity leaders joining us in the audience. Up here on stage directly to my left is Antonio Almeida, and he is Business Development Director and co-coordinator of the Tech for Industry at the Institute for Systems. This is a long one. You did this on purpose. Institute for Systems and Computer Engineering, Technology and Science. That's INESC Tech, for all of you who probably are more aware of it even than I was before coming here today, in Porto, in Portugal. So thanks for joining us. Ionut Tata is on the other side of the stage, and he's the founder and CEO of Iceberg Plus, which is a startup in Romania. So he's here from just outside of Bucharest. Ionut has been leading Iceberg's participation in the EIT RIS ecosystem, the Regional Innovation Scheme ecosystem, first as the InnoEnergy RIS Hub, if I'm not mistaken, and in the meantime as EIT Manufacturing and EIT Urban Mobility RIS Hub. So a lot of involvement there, and great that you're here as such an important partner. Igor Kovac is also here, acting director of the SRIP Factories of the Future and professional research counselor at the Josan Stefan Institute in Ljubljana in Slovenia. Thank you for joining us. You can tell us more about that, all those acronyms when you start speaking. And last but not least, here on our panel is Blanca Chocarro, and she's the KIC, or Knowledge Information Innovation Community project manager at the EIT Manufacturing, and she's working out of Spain presently, if I'm not mistaken. So great that you could be here. A very diverse panel of experts that we have, plus 3 activity leaders in the audience joining us, and we're going to look forward to your insights a little bit later on. So I think I'd like to turn to you, Antonio, perhaps to set the stage for this whole discussion on collaboration and new partnerships for things like circular economy and sourcing of energy. Can you tell us, maybe just set the scene a little bit more by telling us more about the state of play for Industry 4.0, Internet of Things, 5G, and all of these incredibly important structures, and how they're supporting the transition to circular?
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, I think that this is a topic that is very relevant, and we need to stress the importance of Industry 4.0 for this kind of subjects. In fact, the insights that we have is not very positive. We see that after the COVID pandemic, the CO2 emissions already raised. And this is, in fact, a problem that you need to face. And in my perspective, we cannot face this problem without looking to the business models that we can build on top of that. So what are the economic sustainability that you can look for, and how technology can achieve this? And Industry 4.0 is, in fact, a key and an important step towards this objective. So in one
Can I
hand,
just interrupt for a second, because we've been talking about Industry 5.0 for quite a while as well, which is of course the collaboration between human and machine. So, but actually for this discussion, we're taking a step back. Can you?
Yeah, we see Industry 5.0 as an evolution of Industry 4.0 in the sense that we put the human in the loop.
Yes.
But for this sense and for this discussion, in the Industry 4.0, we already have the objective to streamline data usage for new business models. And this is the topic here. So how we can use the information, the digitalization that you can collect from the shop floor, from cities, from the value chain as a whole, to provide new business models that lead us to more sustainable and more efficient value chains. Okay. So the Industry 4.0 or Industry 5.0 is in fact a key element on these parts. Why? Because in first hand, because today we have what we call the topic of cyber physical production systems. But what we are talking about is smart assets that we can install in the shop floor, and everything can communicate data. Everything can say, this is my status, this is what I'm doing, what I can do. So all this stuff are already covered. Then we have, in fact, smart products. So the capability to have products that are not stupid, let's say, but they can interact with us, and it can provide us services, not just as a standalone product. And this product can also interact with the production system. So this is a vision. So how we can have this mesh and not layers of the production system. And then on the other hand is the topic of servitization. With this, today we can have access to everything as a service. I can have access to software as a service. I have access to products as a services. And this is, let's say, changing the way how we see value chains. And this can lead us to new business models, again, to the beginning, of how we can make it more sustainable for a financial perspective. To answer to your question, IoT platforms are essential. How we can collect this data, how we can collect this massive quantity of data that we are generating. 5G is critical. We need to collect this data not only from the shop floor, but from warehouses, from cities, from everything. Artificial intelligence, we talk about this in this morning, how we can receive patterns, how we can identify patterns, how we can identify prescriptive and forecasting decisions. And also, how we can plan everything. We cannot plan just a factory, because this is not enough. We need to start planning the value chain as a whole, because optimization is not local, it's global. So in this sense, we need to collect this data and manage all this information across or within the value chain. And Industry 4.0 is the enabling of that. We need to give this first step to accelerate then the digital transformation and the circular economy, in my perspective.
Thank you very much for that. And once again, we've got the aspect of this holistic view of the value chain. So Jonut, I'd like to come over to you, because with your expertise on value chains that go beyond sort of the streamline of one company, can you tell me how you would go about implementing a circular economy mindset, really, if you're thinking about sort of considering the whole value chain and in a global sense, as Antonio has just said?
Well, thank you for that question. I think looking at the way that value chains are today functioning in Europe, especially in some manufacturing sectors which are producing things in Europe, so not the ones that are outshore towards China already and that we're trying to bring back, but the ones that have a complete, let's say, chain or loop within Europe. I think there's some challenges, because especially where I come from, Romania, a manufacturing territory for Europe for many years now, we see that some of the companies, especially the local ones, the SMEs, with few exceptions, everyone is an SME in this manufacturing pool in Romania, and I think it's similar in Poland or Bulgaria. They are somewhere in a knot on the value chain, and they are doing one thing between one knot and the other. And the problem there is that in order to go towards circularity, they would have to have an oversight. They would have to understand what's happening upstream and downstream. And today they don't see that. Today they see maximum one knot above, one knot below.
So how can that be achieved?
Well, it can be achieved, and we've seen it happening with with entrepreneurs, with leaders from the industry that have started going up, usually up, because it's more efficient to go up the value chain, and try to connect to another knot much higher. Usually, in order to, there's a rule. When you are staying in line, and the line is going in front of you, you're staying in line to buy something, a very good ice cream, let's say, and there's 100 people before you, you're always going to be in the same place, same person in front of you, same person behind you. The only way for you to get up front is to go, break a bit the rules. So for these people they're staying in line in the value chain, so the first paradigm shift there is to disrupt and to go jump 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. And we have a very interesting example, and it's one of the beneficiaries of many activities in EIT manufacturing. And it's a company called Kati Fashion, and they're doing garments for the textile industry. But they started becoming very ambitious about what they can actually do. And they went very high up the value chain, working on digital twins. Although they have a factory where they're producing garments, but now they are setting up the infrastructure so that they can operate with digital twins and with avatars for the final client. So once they are able to do that, they have actually created an interesting duality between producing, but then coming with a digital infrastructure and shortcutting somewhere in the upstream of the value chain. This way, they can gain oversight and they can have a strategic, powerful position so that they can push and become a central bearing or engine for circularity. Because one important aspect in the value chains, the manufacturing value chains of Europe, if you want to implement circularity, it rarely can be limited to doing this within only one organization, only one company. It involves more than one company. So you have to convince all these other people, and it's going to take a while to convince them. So you have to give them more pragmatic reasons. Mm-hmm. So you have to show them that it lowers the cost. You have to show them that it increases revenue, one or the other, or maybe both. But then you also have to have a leader that kind of shortcuts the thing and starts it somewhere. And this is the way that it starts. And then obviously you have to demonstrate that it's worth doing it. Because the SME, the European, the Romanian, the Bulgarian, the Polish, but the European SME will not survive and will not invest into something that's not worthwhile for him to do. So we have to make it worthwhile, the circularity business model. So I think a lot of experimentation needs to be put into there. But you need somebody in the value chain with the mindset who can shortcut things, and then he can pull the others after him.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. And there's so many questions, but I'm going to pick up on the mindset. And you mentioned having to convince everyone. So Igor, I'm going to come over to you, because tell us how important a change of mindset towards circular is amongst business stakeholders.
Yes, thank you for the invitation to be part of this event. We made a study between our industry in Slovenia
at the Josef
Stefan Institute,
mm-hmm.
Yes, and we have also this SRIP. This is Strategic Research Innovation Partnership, very similar to EIT manufacturing in Europe, and we established also something similar in Slovenia to put together the whole industry and academia, and all they can make a new breakthrough. Also from this side of, from the sunny side of Alps, mm-hmm. let me say. After this study, we saw that we don't have any business culture which could be same in North Europe, South Europe, West or East Europe.
Yes, it's very heterogeneous. Huh?
That's right. That will be excellent to calibrate all these people, to make tools perhaps in EIT manufacturing, and to put these cultures more together, not only business, also management cultures. And we saw after this study that especially owners are critical, because they see only in one dimension, perhaps only in a profit dimension, but without Green Deal, then culture, then free time, and all other things, which are also very important for to live in Europe really nice, and that we survive all these things what is necessary for the manufacturing industry and everything. So owners, education of owners will be also one important point in the future.
Thank you very much. And Blanca, I want to bring you into this, and then we're going to go back to some of the points that just got mentioned. But for instance, can you explain to us as EIT Manufacturing why are the EIT itself and EIT Manufacturing, the other KICs, other knowledge and innovation communities, why are they relevant players to support this transition to circular?
Thanks for the question. I think I can build on what you both have said, and I think the answer of one key aspect, it's embedded in the title of this roundtable. Like, I think it's crucial, cross-collaboration. Mm-hmm. And I think here, in this cross-collaboration, EIT, the largest innovation community in Europe, and the knowledge innovation communities, the KICs, like EIT Manufacturing, are key. Because we have these innovation communities, and we can approach it from this across industry perspective, across border perspective, and that's key, no, to this transition to circular economy. And we do so then through the triangle of knowledge that we call. So we need to build it first from the educational perspective. So here, as you were saying, like, we need to re-educate managers, for example. So we can build on that. We can also, for this circular transition, will be necessary new skills. We need to further develop the workforce in that direction. So we need to train, starting from pupils. For example, we have an initiative, Girls Go Circular, that is for high student girls. Or, for example, with higher education, the master's programs, the PhD programs that we have. And then we need to move also to the innovation pillar. In this case, for example, one of the main barriers that we always say, like the lack of funding or the need of a large investment, especially at technology readiness levels at above 6, that they need this demonstration, this industrialization, that they still have a high risk. And then we need to decrease this risk. And I think here is how we are supporting then innovations, for example, in EIT Manufacturing, how we build our innovation calls, our open calls annually in a consortium perspective. So we bring these actors together from industry, large corporations, SMEs, academia, RTOs, and so on, to develop projects in a joint effort, I think.
Thank you very much. And now I want to come back to you, Antonio, because you mentioned the necessity for new business models. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate for us a little bit on some of the business models that you're talking about and which ones you've possibly also seen have some measure of success.
Yeah, when we talk about new business models that are sustainable, we have to think that now products are not an arrow. So the product life cycle is more a circle. It's not an arrow, it's a circle. So this means that we need to create new roles in the value chains. We need to create this circularity that you never have before. And you have to look into other value chains as potential input and sources of raw material. For example, look into the forest sector and see how it can provide raw material for energy generation and others. Mm-hmm. So this kind of cross connection between different value chains is essential. But at the end of the day, technologies, and I'm looking into technologies that can be centralized or decentralized, I'm thinking on blockchain, can be a way so that we can, in a decentralized way, manage new business models. For example, the plastic bottles recycling. How we can define a business model where everyone that has a role can make business with these business models within this value chain. And use platforms and use data using, I'm looking into blockchain, but that I can look into data spaces. That is a technology that is being developed in Europe to integrate all this information and to manage all this information in an effective way and in a trust way between all the roles of the supply chain. Because sometimes one of the problems within this collaboration is also trust between the different actors. But if we can build this trust, if we can if you can use digital technology that can collect data from the different moments, but not only in the production. I'm talking about the production, I'm talking about product design, the product development, but also the product usage. If I can know how a product is used, then I can take decisions if I need to recycle, if I need to do refurbishment, or if I can use in a second hand, for example. So if I can have all this data, if I can have traceability of all this data, then I can take decisions. And these new business models that today is forcing a lot of the companies that are in stock markets. I'm talking about Uber. I'm talking about all the companies that are using in the health industry. A lot of companies that are rising to follow patients, sensors, and so on. They are all collecting data from people. And in this case, we can collect data from products as a smart product and build these new business models.
Mining data to that extent, obviously, you mentioned the word trust has huge implications for trust. Jonut, I wonder if I could bring you back in there just spontaneously to comment on what Antonia has just said with regard to trust. You're involved in so many of the EIT hubs and must have a lot of contacts spiraling out from there. What kinds of trust issues do you encounter?
Touched base there on blockchain and some other things,
Yeah.
and I was actually thinking, I was remembering this, it was kind of a utopian model. I don't know if it succeeded, if it failed, the concept of the distributed autonomous organization, which was an interesting, again, I think, utopian model of running things. But I was asking myself while listening to you, how we could do it in the circular value chain. I mean, once added value is created out of becoming circular, and again, it can be created in many ways. It can be created because of decrease of cost, increase of revenue, decrease of taxation, really depends on the model. But then how can that be distributed? And when trust is about losing something. It's about somebody taking a share of the profit, or gaining more than you do, or knowing more than you do. It's about these things. But how can we create this transparency? How can we distribute maybe the revenues depending on the contribution? And here I think indeed it has to do a lot with transparency. And transparency in this case, I think it has to do with benchmarking. Because again, coming also from digital transformation, there's always the question, is it worth doing it? What is the return on investment on going digital in a business model? And the correct answer is always it depends, because it depends on the sector, the technology, and all these things. But benchmarking, once you can benchmark for certain scales of companies in certain sectors, it's easier for people coming along the way to follow, to understand what's in it for them, what the return on investment is. And it's the same thing in circular economy. Once you see that somebody has done it, once you can have a certain benchmark, you understand the value for yourself as an entrepreneur, as an investor. You can understand the return on investment on it, and it will mobilize you towards investing in it. And I think that when talking about taking this value chain, where I said, there's many people along the value chain. Once you make it circular and you create out of that another value layer, maybe that can be also distributed, a co-owned, a revenue sharing model that comes out of the circularity of the value chain. And I think we can experiment with these things, but there's a couple of things that we need to do. One, to set up some benchmarks. Two, to experiment with transparency and maybe co-ownership. And I think here EIT, the various KICs, especially EIT manufacturing in our case, can be a model of experimenting with revenue sharing, with setting up these new business models where assets are co-designed, co-developed, and then co-exploited, while creating revenues, wealth, value, change for everyone involved.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much. And let's move now to, I want to get back to Igor, and obviously moving from this linear model to circular has a lot to do with minimizing waste, remanufacturing, refurbishing, as we heard in the previous panel. And those are huge areas for innovation, obviously. Igor, I'm wondering if we can pick up, just to pick up the idea of the mindset change again. How can manufacturers now, the ecosystem out there, get out of a waste management mindset and more into what we would call a resource management, circular economy approach, thinking of waste obviously as the next resource?
Yes, I think that holistic view is important, and without this we can't go further. But everything ends and begins in detail. And for details, we have to have very skilled, clever people with good education. Paula just mentioned about the education and processes and concepts and so on. But I think that we have to start by children. One example from Austria, when I was a professor at the University at Graz, we established so-called Kinderuni, that is a university for children. Mm-hmm. And we started with really primary school children, to come to the university, to show them these big halls, to get the imagination of the study at the university, because Graz University was a little older building and was really impressive. And then we were also taught by the Thomas Prezzina. It's a famous writer of children things, and he gave us he told us how to teach the children to come to the decision that perhaps they decide to study and to work techniques and technology and nature in the future. So we bring the children to the university, and then I'm a robotics specialist, and we show them the robotic equipment at the end. After half an hour, step by step, to go to the high point of this presentation. We showed them the robots, how they work, how they what can they do, these robots, and they were very satisfied. And I think that almost some of these young girls and boys, someone decided to study techniques, robotics. There is nothing special, they are interesting thing, and this is the first step. And then slowly to go to the higher education, we need also the middle educated people, and then to higher and to the top. And to deal with these details, that's mean innovation. Innovation, that's mean patents, that's mean really with all experiences, skills, education, base science is here very, very important to make the products after the base science connection of different kicks, for example, cross kicks project are I think very important thing to come to the new products, new technologies. There is added value. Really high added value. And I think that this we need in Europe. Then to come from demonstrators to the
outreach, you mean outreach in the education?
That's right.
Okay.
And then to come from the demonstrator prototype to the market product, it's a bridge to overcome this, let me say, hole, not the valley. And I think this is the right role of EIT. To overbridge, to support these things, to come to the payable, flexible, in our case, solutions which could be implemented on the market.
And definitely those types of educational initiatives are underway, and we'll be speaking to a couple, we'll get to the projects afterwards, but I want to still stay up here on stage for just a couple more minutes because, and perhaps just get a little bit more on this idea of redefining waste, because this is really what circular is all about. And Antonio, can you talk, for instance, a bit more about waste as a raw material to actually integrate into new production processes?
this is what I'm trying to say before between cross value chain interaction, because in fact what we can also look for is for what we call normally industrial symbiosis. So we can try to find what is the waste of an industry.
Industrial symbiosis.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So in fact what we are trying to find is what are the wastes of one specific value chain or factory or production system, and that can be a raw material for another one. Or a raw material or energy. For example, some industries may need heat, others may need cold. Some of them and some industries require a specific quality for water. Others may not need this kind of quality. So how we can create this kind of symbiosis between them so that what it is waste for me is a raw material for you. There are already some parks, industrial parks in Europe that are lighthouses trying to implement this. Of course, with a lot of challenges, but with very good, promising outputs. But the point is that we are not just looking into the symbiosis between industry, but also with society. So how we, in the next years, we need to bring also this reality to cities. So how we can bring industry to cities, and how we can interact and create this symbiosis between the cities and industry that somehow today is detached in somehow. So this is how we see, and of course we need to have trust between industry and society that is not so very well defined right now, but to work on top of that and use again digitalization as a way to achieve this, because of course manage all this in a very complex scenario, in a very complex industrial scenario is difficult, but today with this digitalization we have more data to do planning, to visualize, to monitor, to have digital twins of the entire, let's say, of the entire network, and not in silos. So the idea is to break silos and have a vision of the network and do a more integrated planning.
That kind of integration, I mean, when you talk about industries and cities having or creating or coming into a symbiosis, I can imagine that's an idea that a lot of people would probably find pretty disturbing. We have the feeling that cities are far too urbanized and far too removed from the natural world as it is. So do you possibly have an example, or are there any pilot projects that you could tell us about or describe that are where this kind of a symbiosis is actually being looked at in a sustainable but also a social and ecological way?
Yes, in Portugal there are different, well, not different, but some examples that we can have. For example, how to implement factories near to cities, and for example they can belong to a community, an energy community. Very simple. So how we can have, because during the day the energy demands are different between also communities and industry. So it can be expensive to have my own generation of energy. So how why not create this kind of synergies between energy? Because sometimes when I'm at home, maybe the factories are stopped and vice versa, and this energy can be used. Same with heat. Some heat that I use to the factories can be used to the blocks of the cities and reduce the energy, let's say, that we are consuming. So this kind of symbiosis, in this case, in these industrial parks, not only inside but outside. I remember about Denmark that has industrial parks already working on that, and there are lighthouses to be visited.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Jono, do you have a comment?
About an example which I like a lot, and we used it in Romania to kind of popularize the concept of redesigning value chains and a bit circular economy, and it's the parallel between IKEA and OpenDesk. I don't know if you're familiar with OpenDesk. OpenDesk is an interesting platform where you can download for free designs for furniture which are based on cutting on a flat wooden surface with the CNC machine and then putting the furniture together, desks and various other pieces of furniture. The concept there is that you download it and you produce it locally in a local CNC shop, or you can order it and pay for it from the local CNC shop. And while IKEA is producing furniture in Romania, then taking it to a big warehouse somewhere in Germany or Sweden, bringing it back for sale in Romania. changing the paradigm towards the open desk concept. It introduces the Creative Commons design, which is the design of the furniture, which then can be used for free, or it can become a valuable asset. It can generate value for 3 persons along a value chain. But the interesting concept is that it can be transferred towards decentralized production, small production capacities. And we think of industry as being large, dirty, noisy, far away, 1,000 workers, but it can be different. It can be a local 3D print shop that is 3D printing stuff we need in our neighborhood so that we don't have to go to the big supermarket or cash and carry to buy it there. So we can think about the cash and carries of the future becoming big, average, small 3D printing shops.
Personalized additive manufacturing.
We can imagine lots of things, but what I want to say is that I think the factory of the future is going to be different depending on how the value chain will evolve. A more circular, but also a more decentralized value chain will mean that we produce locally, and consumption of energy or raw material and production of waste will be in direct proportion to how much we consume within the city, within a metropolis, and so on. So I think we will be heading towards this kind of scenario. We have to be prepared for it. And I think the data, so the digital layer is the layer which can create transparency indeed, can compare one city to the other, one value chain to the other, and that layer will create trust.
Absolutely.
I think that this is very important, because if you look into the data, we see that 27% of energy consumption is from industry. Let's say 27. But the indirect impact that the industry creates on transport that consume other 27%, and households, so the products that are generated and the way how we use these products, we see that an optimization in manufacturing have a huge impact, not only in manufacturing, but all the economy and all the scenarios. So this potential is very important here.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from our room so far? Yes, absolutely. David, at the front here.
I have it on. Good. You said we need to redefine waste, and that troubles me. Because if you're starting off in the position of redefining waste, you're probably going to start off with recycling. And that isn't where we need to start. I think we need to start thinking about eliminating waste and getting value out of product, and through product life extension first, over and over and over again. Recycling is your final option when you have nothing left that you can do with it. So I'd love it if we avoided the word redefining waste.
Okay, I'll
Talked about eliminating waste.
Okay. Minimizing was where eliminating is pretty pie in the sky at this point. Minimizing was where I wanted to go. Sorry. So your question was for me. Anybody have any question for the panelists?
I think that this is a very good point.
Yeah.
And because today we are used to see products that have a specific life cycle, and they are very rigid in the way how they are used. And if you look at Tesla, the car evolved along the time. So people feel that the car is updated. So this sense of continuity can help us to increase the product life cycle and reduce the need to buy new cars and buy new or other products. But these needs need to reduce with the extension of the product life cycle, and only at the end decide what to do. It can be recycling, it can be refurbishment, or it can be other ways that we can convert into value and creating value to the system.
Mm-hmm. Igor.
Yes, I think important issue is long-term thinking and immediately act immediately. And another thing from my experience, I like good examples from the practice. We came with one very good idea to the company, and we asked them, would you employ this new technology? Oh, this is a revolution and so on. Where can we see this technology working? No, you will be the first. No, we don't want to be the first, we want to be the second one. And this is a problem, I think, in Europe. We have a conservatism to avoid to implement new things and to overbridge such things. I think it's an element of EIT manufacturing, a perfect tool to help to introduce such technologies to cover the risk that the companies, other things, can implement these newest things on the world, for example. And for example, in our case, robots are very intelligent equipment. We can do flexible things and everything. And but the periphery, all the surroundings of the robots are not flexible. And if you want to introduce, for example, in the automotive industry, we have in Austria one very famous producer of the cars. They have no own car, but they order 55,000 small series of cars. And in summer, we would like to have a cabriolet, in winter, Jeep. How to do this on the same line? It's a problem. And we find a solution. We want to introduce this solution, but they said, this is a revolution. It's not evolution. And these are problems to make a real breakthrough in Europe to come faster to the new results. And by the periphery, again, because the robot is so intelligent, they can move things like a human, by a human. If you want to do something, I need these tools, I need this material, I need these fixtures, and then to produce, let's say, 5 or 100 parts. The same thinking could be also for the robots, and we introduced so-called robot edit reconfiguration, that the robot make their own working place with the modules and everything to build cars, then to build perhaps gearboxes, then perhaps electronic parts, to change the production very fast. I think this is the most important point, not to be so fast by the production, because this is from the energy point of view also not the best way, but by the changing of production from one product to another to be very fast, in minutes. That will be, I think, the solution. And then we can introduce such a production locally with desktop factories, smaller things, to be energy more efficient, to be material more efficient. And I think these are topics for the future calls also in the EIT manufacturing.
Thank you very much. Blanca, yes.
I want to add on what you have said, that I think we have this fear, no, of being the front runners. I think here I can share a nice success story that we have in the past 2 years, because this happens as well when we talk about sustainability and the take of sustainable products and services. And in this case, for example, EIT Manufacturing West was part of the ETV Secretariat. ETV stands for the Environmental Technology Verification, and this process, it's not a label, it's for those technologies, those sustainable innovations that usually do not fit on any standard eco label, but still they have an environmental claim that they can prove. And in this frame, it's a possibility for them to get this environmental claim demonstrated by independent bodies. There is independent verification bodies to prove that, okay, what this technology is offering, it's actually environmentally sustainable. And this facilitates, on one hand, the investment side, to know that they feel more secure investing in those technologies, and then, of course, in the market uptake of those, because they have this proof on the environmental claim. Yeah.
Jonut, I saw you nodding there, and I have another question for you, because we talked about this idea of looking at entire value chains. And if we look at the whole value chains of carbon-intensive sectors, how can the development, it was mentioned here, it's local value chains. How can the development of local value chains in manufacturing actually contribute and help towards achieving climate neutrality?
Well, I think the example I just gave is also hinting towards that, because it is, I mean, big part of the CO2 footprint of value chains is in the logistics, in moving the products around. So once you only have to move raw materials around, or once you source raw materials locally, you cut that out. So that's a really important step that you can do. Beyond that, obviously, having a larger scale manufacturing instead of smaller scale today most likely would be more energy intensive. I mean, to just produce the same amount of parts with local capacities would consume more energy. So once we balance that out, I think it will have a lot of sense to produce locally. So there's things that we need to work on, like the energy part, and the Franz Josef Institute seems to have one of the solutions for that, which I'm really glad to hear, and it's a great concept. But beyond that, we can also look into some European initiatives that are tackling, experimenting with this. For example, I'm a big follower of the Just Transition Fund and the Just Transition plans, because the Just Transition concept is looking at the regions in Europe which have a history of CO2 intensive economies based on coal, oil, gas, and now they will be undergoing a process of becoming CO2 neutral in the economy. So moving employees, moving companies, moving big parts of society and economy towards activities which are CO2 neutral. And I think that is a great opportunity, because if we zoom into the regions which are on this list, it's really important manufacturing regions in Poland, in Germany, in Romania, in Bulgaria, in Greece, where if you invest not just money, because the Just Transition Plan will invest a lot of money in these territories, but if you invest the proper knowledge to support proper investment that is happening there, you can achieve spectacular things. And you can use this as a pilot scenario, which can then be scaled up towards Europe. Because the Green Deal was also, when it came up, it was an ambitious plan, but I don't think you can tackle CO2 neutrality all over Europe at the same time, and starting with the important places where CO2 is at its peak. You know, think of Krakow, think of Brasov, or Krakow in Poland, Brasov in Romania, which are rainy cities because of the pollution that is there. And these are two examples of territories which are in this plan and which will undergo this change. And I think it can be spectacular if we manage to soft land the kind of knowledge from the KICs, EIT manufacturing, but also the climate kick, also energy, into these territories to support with the way the manufacturing changes in those territories, the way that innovation and technology is redesigning manufacturing, but then also bringing energy and climate-related knowledge that is developed by the other KICs. And I think this is an interesting idea for cross-KIC activities, actually.
That's very interesting. It's also the idea, if I understand you correctly, also of sort of it's maybe near-shoring reloaded. It's an intense form of near sourcing.
Well, it can be. You can see it as such. You can see it as such. Basically, it's the focus in these territories, in the Just Transition territories, will be about moving CO2 intensive economy towards CO2 neutrality, which means cutting job on one end, creating jobs on the other end. But what I've seen in some reflexes of some of these territories would be to just say, okay, we're buying hydrogen buses. But it's about more than that. It's about creating local capacities to design and manufacture hydrogen infrastructure, for example. So it's about creating an economy that long-term contributes to CO2 neutrality in Europe, not just to cut on the CO2 emissions in those territories. So it's about bringing new assets for the Green Deal, actually.
Thank you. Any further comments on that from Antonio or Igor? Igor, I think.
Yes, I think another topic will be very interesting in the future. Payable production of spare parts. if we use things for 12, 15 years, the spare parts will be very important. How to produce this efficiently? So these are topics which will be, I think, very interesting in the future. Good, if we are on the production and manufacturing side. On the other side, our institute works very lot in the direction of sustainability, Green Deal, and so on. And we have one sentence, we say, research is a key to addressing the now urgent challenges of climate change, ecological collapse, and future energy needs. So fundamental science invents the future. And for this reason, we invest now a really lot of money to establish, to continue with this research with our competencies and capacities. Slovenia is small, but anyway, we are excellent on some things. So the fundamental science builds the future, we say. And I think this is very, very important. To build such new buildings, we can also keep talents at home. We can get these talents to be part of these new things, to think about the new things because they will get challenges, and now we are staying behind. We have really a lot of challenges, and with such institutions, with such departments, and we can really solve these things. I said the problem is in detail, and details must be solved immediately.
Blanca, perhaps you can just elaborate a little bit more, because there is actually an EIT circular economy community. Elaborate on how it is sort of furthering the cause of green manufacturing, because I know there are a number of main activities that you would like to talk about, and then we can go to and talk to some of the projects.
Yeah, sure. I can talk about that cross-kick activity that is not on this, but let's start. So what it means, cross-kick, is that all the kicks, or some of them, we work together on
innovation community.
Knowledge innovation community, that's correct, on a common project. And it's the case with the EIT circular economy community. And under this activity is so relevant because circular economy is, as we are saying, it requires this collaboration. So why don't we start ourselves collaborating in that direction? And under this initiative, for example, we are supporting what I was mentioning before, the ETB. We have been supporting previous years, giving funding support to those startups and scale-ups in that direction. But also other relevant activities are, for example, the circular economy prizes. And this activity we started this year, and is for startups that are already working in circular economy. We define like 4 topics that we believe are very relevant. Of course, new circular business models, how we need to move from product to service, how we need to talk of a shared economy. Then on new circular economy assessment methodologies, how the development of voluntary schemes of labels and certificates will generate these incentives that can facilitate the market uptake of new solutions. Or also, for example, an answer that was already previously discussed, waste valorization, how important it is to bring waste, close the loop, not to bring it back as energy, as a raw materials, and so on. And also on new product passports, like how we need to keep track of the whole value chains and how we can do that with digital product passports, how relevant is digital here. And in that sense, I can talk about other activities, but just to wrap up, for example, we are a part of the coordination group of the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. And over there we have EU circular talks we have been having in these past years. And for example, this year is on digital product passports. And I don't know, I think I don't need to talk in detail, but actually the 1st of December, we have our annual event here at the EIT house as well, and it can be followed for free online. And we will talk about why the future is circular, and we will have keynote speakers, and we will bring everything we have done so far, like these winners of the circular economy prizes will pitch their solutions.
Thank you very much. You looked so meaningfully towards Antonio at the mention of digital product passports. Do you have a final comment or something to add on those, perhaps, in this idea of managing circular economy value chains?
Yeah, because when we start looking at this level of abstraction, there are a lot of problems that arises. And one of them is how we manage copyrights. If you are looking into this distributed, we start selling capacity and not products. So how we manage the IPR of a product, that today is critical for companies. And we enter at, and of course, trust is a point, but then security is another. So we enter in a huge set of areas that need to be developed. And this topic about product, the product identity, the product configuration characteristics, that is developed by a specific company, although we produce this all around the world in different factories, the copyrights belongs to that company. How to manage this? So a lot of topics arise, and this is of course not solved, and that's the reason why there are a lot of challenges in front of us, and this one is critical for sure.
Thanks very much for enlightening us on that. And I think it's time to go to our projects, because we do have 3 of them in the room, and we've got a little more time in this session than the last one, but we want to make sure that everybody gets enough time such that questions can come afterwards. So I would ask Amina Pereno to stand up. She's here representing the project Sistema with an MA, a large MA on the end. And please tell us...
manufacturing.
Yes, exactly. Tell us about yourself, about the project outlook, and how it's supporting the whole push towards circular manufacturing.
Yeah, I am the activity leader of the Sistema project that is working on sustainability in medtech manufacturing. And as was also mentioned this morning, the connection between health and manufacturing is getting stronger, and also because healthcare is really a cross-cutting sectors in which we can find medtech manufacturing, of course, but also green tech solutions and very different type of manufacturing companies and stakeholders working in this sector. At the same time, despite the relevance, maybe also because of the relevance of this sector, it has been little targeted with environmental standards, environmental requirements, but the situation is changing, so circular economy strategies have and will have an increasing impact on the healthcare sector and healthcare manufacturing. That's why our projects start from this also gap of knowledge in this sector. So the idea and our goal was to really start filling this knowledge gap, especially for small and medium enterprises working on medtech, about sustainability and circular economy. We think it was very important to start with an education project because creating knowledge and awareness is for sure the first step in this sector that, as I said, is compared to other productive sector as a little history, knowledge and sustainability. We try to do this working together with different type of stakeholders, so involving companies, first of all, but also clusters, training professionals, and sustainability experts in healthcare. And the idea and the result is a training that is addressing different professionals in the healthcare sector, in manufacturing, of course, trying also to putting together different management cultures and production cultures across Europe, because also the level of different regions is really different. So we really are working hard to start with this contribution on the knowledge and skills in this sector.
And what kind of sort of tangible outcomes have you already got to talk about, or is that?
Yeah, our main result is an online training supported by publication. So that is targeting medtech professionals, but also green tech professionals, both designers and managers. So really providing a holistic perspective on the topic. So working on product development and product strategies, but also on management strategies in this area.
Thank you very much for telling us about Sistema, and that was Amina Pereno. And if anybody has a question for her, just hang on to it, because I'm going to proceed to David Peck, who introduced himself earlier today. He's from the Technical University in Delft in the Netherlands, and you've got a project with you. I'll let you talk about it, LRM.
Yes.
Yes.
Lean remanufacturing. So this is my dream project. I love it. For decades, I've been thinking about remanufacturing TQM lean principles. Never been able to bring them together until EIT manufacturing comes along and opens the door. I am so happy. So about 20 years ago, I remember somebody turning around to me and saying, TQM lean, not so much an opportunity missed, an opportunity never fully realized. I think that's as true today as it was 20 years ago. And that's in what I would call linear conventional manufacturing. In the world of remanufacturing, that's even more true. It tends, from our research and work that we've done with companies over about 10 years now, we see it as an ad hoc add-on activity that isn't actually treated in the same way as what I call OE production is done. So there's a big gap and something missing there. Let's just talk about remanufacturing for a second, because it's been mentioned almost in a long sentence. So, oh yeah, you know, this product life extension stuff, like refurbishing and repairing and remanufacturing, like it's all homogenized and it's all one thing. I don't think it is. And I would even be so bold to argue that when we see the title circular manufacturing, and we're talking to partners who are manufacturing in a factory, the only circular manufacturing activity that they're going to be doing in that factory in a similar way to their linear is remanufacturing. All other activities are different. Remanufacturing is the only one. So let me define it for a second. You produce something in a factory, and when it comes out, it's in a box with a warranty, as good or better than new, and here's the killer, the user can't tell the difference. You get an OE new production, you get a reman product, you can't tell which is which. That you don't get with refurbish. You can tell the refurbished product. So that's really important. Now, the other important part, and I come back to the quality part that I was, and the lean production part that I was talking about, is that you've got a lot of sectors where you can't install repaired, refurbished components. The built environment, mobility, aerospace, you cannot put repaired stuff into those domains.
Health as well.
Health,
we just heard
definitely.
from
the list goes on. And the more
number
you
one
think,
on the list.
Exactly. The more you think about it, it's like, actually, most stuff. There's standards and safety requirements. You just can't put second-hand stuff into these environments for safety and legislation reasons. Reman product, you can. It's 100 billion euros of European opportunity in the short term. And I think it's going to transform European manufacturing. So what are we doing? We're working with a range of partners and companies, and we're developing workshops. And we're just finishing off the pilot workshops this year. I worked together with University College Dublin, Grenoble University in France, VTT, the research agency in Finland, and TU Delft. And we're working right across Europe, developing the workshops. And here's the good news. Next year, we're going to roll out lots of workshops. So if you're a manufacturer and you want to learn about lean remanufacturing, get in touch and we can help you.
Lean remanufacturing. Thank you very much, David. I'm sure there's going to be a question or two that will come in about that. A very, very interesting presentation there. And last but certainly not least on our list is Peter Kreinig, and he is here. He's from Chalmers, and he's got a project to present called Pathfinder.
Yes, thank
So
you very
we'd
much.
like to hear about that.
So this is a educational activity concerned with skills development, right? And what we are doing is developing learning protocols for working professionals. So the stakeholders are not students, but manufacturing professionals out in the industry. You know, that's traditionally, if you go on let's say a classical consumer is in the automotive industry, either a process planner or an engineer, or sometimes a machine operator. So there is a really huge discrepancy of the, let's say, skills need. And what we are doing here, you know, professional education for industry was always physical, right, face to face, I mean, for many years. Then this changed overnight with the pandemic. And, you know, like university teaching professional education moved online, but a lot of things were lost along the way. So what we are doing is in Pathfinder, and I think this is also great that such kind of opportunity can be pursued with EIT manufacturing, is really trying to combine traditional synchronous teaching with remote learning empowered by SkillsMove, right? So SkillsMove is, as you all know, still rather new platform with a lot of learning nuggets that can support individual learning or collective learning. So what we are doing in our case is basically using SkillsMove as a pre-learning activity, as remote learning, as evaluation of training, and then combined, sort of integrated with sort of real professional education. So we rolled out a pilot course because this has never been done before, because, you know, before you start really commercializing this education, which is always, you know, it's never free of charge, right? So you have to evaluate this. So we rolled out a pilot course with 60 plus attendees, and what we're doing is sort of trying out four different learning pathways. I mean, 3 of them, I would say, associated with productivity, but one has a pretty neat circularity angle and waste reduction angle, because we are addressing process fluids, right? I mean, they are used in all plants for as a metal working fluid for forming operation or machining operation, or in heat treatment operations for cleaning, and these are unsustainable products, essentially if they're petroleum oil based. And I mean, Sweden alone creates about 80,000 tons of waste out of metal working fluids, right? And then there's a question of industrial water that is used in these operations. So, I mean, and obviously there is a lot of things that will help future manufacturing be more sustainable, right? And now in Sweden there is a lot of discussion that future production will be fossil-free, right? And now, so how do we do a fossil-free production if we're using mineral oil-based process fluids, right? Now, the producers of these products would say, well, good luck with this, you'll never make it. I mean, then the alternatives are trying to really implement something innovative, but I mean, back to the previous comment, no one wants to be first. And what would be the cost of it? And then on the second way is how if we kind of try to improve established products, is, you know, conventional products, is I mean, the big issue is regulations and rich legislation on chemicals. A lot of traditional elements are taken out because they're not allowed anymore. So this is what we're doing, right? So whatever, we can integrate any any learning pathway in this let's say hybrid learning for future training and skills development, and one case is being tasted now, right?
Thank you very much, Peter Kreinig. And for that presentation, are there any reactions from the panelists to what you've heard from the projects, or any questions from the room, possibly also to our project leaders? I'm thinking there are some, but we possibly need a cup of coffee. I have one question to come back to you, David, with the lean remanufacturing, because you said you had done a pilot. What exactly have you observed there? And you sound very optimistic for where this is going in the future. So what sorts of...
Yeah, in the each partner has run pilots in the different countries, and in fact, Delft has ended up running them all over Europe. What we discovered, and we've done previous work as well, which we're building on, but in the way that we're doing it with lean remanufacturing, is first of all, we have a session where we do a scoping activity. What does the company know now? Where are they at? Where do they want to be? What do they want to do? And also, what are the drivers? That's been eye-opening. Why do the companies want to talk about circular manufacturing? Why do they want to talk about remanufacturing? One of the big things we've been getting back is customers. Customers are not just asking, especially business to business, demanding. You do this, you move down this direction, or we will find someone who will. So it's actually a game changer for some of these companies. The other one, which is a big part of what we're talking about today, resilient European economy, is supply chain concern. We don't think we're going to get stuff to keep in business. And it isn't. This morning I was hearing about
your point about materials.
Yeah, I was hearing this morning about cost and financial reasons. That's not what the companies are telling me. They're saying, yes, it's hurting. Cost is king and it hurts. That's not what's keeping them awake at night.
But we can't get our raw materials.
We can't produce. 6 months of that, you're out. Okay, so that's really worrying them. So they're almost, yeah, let's do this. Then the second part we do is then the tools, techniques, and skills. That's the second part. And then the third part is the business model. So it's fitting exactly what the panel is discussing. And actually, the business model is the key. In circular, it's all about the business model. Often engineers and technologists will go, yeah, no, it's some really smart technology. And I'm going, it's always about the business model. And the business model changes dramatically. And that's what we've been observing.
At the end of the day, it's all about the business model. Antonio, I'm sure you have something to say to that.
Yeah, and I don't know what is your experience, but what we also found is that some industries don't have the control of everything. Sometimes they control the product, but they don't control the process, or they control the process, but they don't control the product. And this is a huge problem, because we cannot, as I said before, that you need to manage value chains. We also need to manage the circularity between product and processes. We need to think in a logic of develop for excellence. So the product should be thinking in the way that can simplify the production, and vice versa. And how we can do that if the companies don't collaborate, and how we can do that if they don't control one thing or another. This happens a lot in Portugal. We control the process, but not the product. So this is
what happens after the product.
Exactly. Oh, and sometimes they receive some kind of product specification that is very expensive or not sustainable to produce, because they don't know the process. So how to manage this? And I think that this connection with the lean can help to streamline and to make these dots more connected, if done in a collaborative way.
I totally agree. And another thing I totally agree. There's another thing we noticed, and we noticed in our research on circular and manufacturing. One, intellectual property. Who owns stuff? That's going to come under increasing difficulty. All our IPR is designed for a linear economy.
Yeah.
It's not designed for a circular economy. And if you rip up IPR and rewrite it all, everything changes, right? So it's a big shift. Second, It's a horrible expression, but it's called market cannibalization. So you start remanufacturing stuff, your OE sales die. But you can't keep running reman if you haven't got OE running. So how do you fix that? Third is exactly what you just said. It's systemic, and you were saying this as well. You need a complicated network of collaboration with you get this, we get that, you get this, we get that, you get that. And it's super, super complicated. Mm-hmm. Anyone who comes along to me and says, oh, well, let's just shift to circular, it's quite easy. I'm going, you don't understand this. We would be doing it if it was easy. It is really hard and costly.
Thanks very much, David. Blanca, do you have any comments based on what you've heard here, knowing what you know about what EIT is striving for?
I think building on what you say, how relevant are these complex networks that we all need to work together in that direction. And this is what I was trying to say that EIT, the knowledge innovation communities, are trying to do. How this community, we need to work in that direction to bridge this gap and to reduce these costs.
This at least was a perfect example of the idea being there, the ideas, the opportunities, and sort of the convergence with the EIT manufacturing funding has certainly brought that project forward, and we look forward to actually hearing more about it probably at a future edition of this summit. Jonut, did you have a comment?
I was thinking, in order to set up circular business models, circular models, you need some cushioning, some sandboxes where you can play. Because what you said is very important. Europeans have become, and haven't always been, but they have become conservative. They would like somebody else to go first. But if you take the risk away, and if you finance a pilot where you can go crazy and experiment, some of these pilots will fail, but 1 in 10 will succeed. But then the pilot should not only be about technology, not just about the robots. It has to be also about redesigning, rethinking IPR. It has to be, and I think this is really important, about changing the funding, the financial model behind it. Because, and I think this has been experimented, I think, nearby in the Netherlands with buildings that could be set up in a circular way where the glass would belong to, let's say, Saint-Gobain, just to say a name that comes to my head. The steel would belong to ArcelorMittal, and it would just be leased to the operator of the building. And 20 years later, it would be taken back because it could be reused. So that's an interesting way to putting circularity to work, while also rethinking the funding model for, in this case, a building. But you could do the same with products. You could do the same with cars, obviously. So we can rethink these things, but who's paying for that, and who's taking the risk away? Mm-hmm. So we need sandboxes to do this, and it cannot just be about the technology or the technical part of it. It has to be about legal parts and commercial parts as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Please comment on that.
You've just described my dream thing. Oh, this is just...
That's 2 dreams.
No, this is the real dream.
We're zooming in here.
Oh, man. I mean, I have a vision of a network, or you call them a sandbox. I don't mind what we call them, like living lab development, circular development centers. And what am I talking about? I'm talking like for company pilot test lines. And what do you mean pilot test lines? I'm like, they can come along with product design, operations, marketing, finance, legal, and investors, and everyone's playing. I've got, like, in my head, I've got 50 PhDs working around on this as well, hundreds of master's students, loads of academics, 3, 4 companies, 5 companies all working. And you're thinking, Dave, this is like a 30, 40, 50, 100 million euro center. And I'm going, yeah, and there's about 50 of them across Europe.
Exactly.
And you're like, what? You're going crazy. And I'm going, this morning we were talking about 7 years. Mm-hmm. that's the scale. These sandboxes are not little things. I think you're not thinking little either, right?
I mean, if you want to go Living Lab, I'm joining the project because I think it's important to have actual clients, consumers joining this, being part of this, because you have to validate the value chain all over, so from top to bottom. So you need everyone in the value chain connected to every one of these sandboxes, and obviously they will be different for each industry or sector. So you have to start somewhere. But I mean, we're going to talk about this later. Thanks.
Fantastic. So a couple of really great ideas and also impetuses impeti to collaborate right here in the room. I know that we do have a couple of questions that have come in from our online audience. So they are sitting at home. Those who are sitting at home already have access to that cup of coffee and are well awake. Let's see if we can get them on the screen here so that I can read them. Okay. One of them comes from... Which one is which, Anna? Start from the last one. Okay. So there are some products that require important investments that can't be covered or returned on by the scale of some areas' market sizes, thus making it unprofitable to produce locally. Do you think this definition of, I need to have it moved up, I'm really sorry. These screens are always... Do you think this definition of, sorry, guys, that actually wasn't going to work. Maybe I'll start with the top one, and then we'll go to the second one, yeah? There we go. Do you think this definition of industry of the future, which is more circular and decentralized, can be only applied for specific types of manufacturing sectors and products, and which ones do you have in mind? Yeah, exactly. I was thinking this one should be going to Jonut, but I don't know who sent that. Walid Liassi sent that in. Okay, I'm very sorry. Couldn't read that from here. Jonut, is that a question that's coming in and I think probably needs to be directed to you?
Sure. I mean, I think some industries can make this move faster, and they are more obvious suspects for this. And it might have to do with everything that's connected to the creative industries, let's say. So fashion, furniture, everything that has to do with design being then implemented. And this would help scaling up, distribution of new designs by local production. And then when you go more towards technical things, like things that embed cyber-physical systems or engines, that would be more complicated unless there's a certain level of standardization which is not yet reached, because I think it also has to do a lot with the competitive advantages of various manufacturing leaders in Europe. But I think there's some sectors where we can do that fast with a high impact. The furniture example has been there for some years now, and it's scaling up, and I think that's a good success model. Then we have fashion. And again, I think fashion is something that can make the switch quite fast. And I think that by using 3D printing, which for many years now is, the promised land, which has not yet delivered, but still I think there's a hidden gem in there in connection with the appropriate business model. And it can be, again, connected to creative industry, to products that come out of design and that we are buying into, consuming into, and now have their own logistic value chain behind. So start with the obvious ones, the other ones will follow, and I think we need 5, 10, 15 years to go full circular.
Okay, thank you very much for answering that question. I'm getting a handle on this screen, guys. Pardon me. There's a glare on it at a certain place, so I probably have to come out of the angle of the camera. There's one question here at the bottom. I'm not sure who has sent it in because it's anonymous, but are there any EIT manufacturing initiatives for new age manufacturing like semiconductors? And I think actually we've already located the EIT person in the room who wants to answer that one. Christian Bölling from the CLC. Central. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm taking over that question also on behalf of all my colleagues in the room. I mean, we are dealing with manufacturing in general, yeah, so it doesn't exclude semiconductors. And I also would say it's already an industry that's well established. Maybe it was a bit hidden because we only saw the computer that is it's ready to use, but semiconductors is a industry that is definitely in our scope, that also fits to all our initiatives. So being it the master programs we have, where we also talk about digital technology, about green circular manufacturing, being it our innovation activities, where we have this topic on green transition, on digitalization, which affects the semiconductor industry, going to business creation, where we have a lot of startups that provide solutions for the manufacturing industry in software, as a service, as others, and that's demanded by semiconductors as well. And to give one example also from our region, so we have a person working from Dresden. If you know the semiconductor industry in Germany, so Dresden is really a key area, key player in that, and we are working with the ecosystem there, engaging with them and find out what exactly we can bring in, and we see a lot of opportunities, as I already said. So yes, definitely.
Thank you very much to our online audience member for that question. There is another question here at the top. Unfortunately, we'd have... Yeah, David, please.
Can I add to that?
Feel free.
Semiconductors. Actually, what's interesting in the semiconductor story is the production manufacture of semiconductors. Far more interesting is the design and manufacture of the machines that make semiconductors, the goose that lays the golden egg. So in the Netherlands, and I've been having a lot of conversations, we have a company called ASML. And a lot of people have never heard of ASML. They valued on the New York Stock Exchange about last year, I think. They valued straight in at $500 billion, right? That's a company in the Netherlands. That's a tech spin out from TU Delft. And they make the machines that make the semiconductors. Ursula von der Leyen has been over there recently. It's a key company in Europe. We need more of that type of thing.
So this is a nearshoring that would essentially make the Taiwanese firms unnecessary for our value chains. Okay, and how quickly is that coming along?
They're growing like mad. All our manufacturing graduates in that field get gobbled up by that company in the Netherlands. They need a lot more people. In fact, they're constrained by, again, it's another story, they're constrained by people. They can't get people. But I think that's an example of manufacture in Europe. Sometimes we look at the direct thing, like how do we make more semiconductors? No.
We have to go a step back.
How do we
chain.
make the goose that lays the golden egg? That's what we need to look at.
Maybe just to add, I mean, that are those hidden champions we have plenty of in Europe. Nobody knows. And they are bringing really the value, because we also know we own the technology in Europe. We are selling that to the Asian market, but we own the technology. So we have the capabilities already there. We just need to build factories out of it that are not in Taiwan or in South Korea or in China.
Sorry, I know there's another thing going on in Europe, and we've got to watch this. There is rapidly shifting positions by Commission and member states on what we can shift where. China is out, Russia is out, Iran is out, and third countries are coming under more scrutiny. So let's watch that as well.
Sorry, I'm communicating with my team back here because there's another question at the top of this screen, and I'm just wondering if you can show me some more of it, because I can't read the question to the end as it is. Unfortunately, it always shortens them there. Is that another question from Walid? If you open it up for me. Are there any other questions from the panel here? Any other comments? Any other questions for our project leaders here? We heard from healthcare. There's the question. Thank you very much. too many channels running here. There are some manufacturing firms that use recycled materials in their value chain, but that only constitutes a small percentage, about 10 to 15%, from the amount of materials they transform. Do you think we can call them circular manufacturing value chains just because there's the evidence, the existence of circularity? Or do you think there should be a threshold to be called circular? If yes, what do you think this threshold can be, and what can its values be? You can comment on that. Perhaps, Antonio, I'd let you take a stab at that first.
Yeah, I think that, well, it's a matter of interpretation about this. It is very different from industry to industry. So in some industries, it is more easy to have the circularities. Maybe these numbers are too low. On the others, maybe it's too high. So it will depend. But what I would like to raise here is that more, in my opinion, more than talking about the threshold, I think that it should be the concept of, and we talked a little bit about this in the morning, about resilience. What is the resilience of a company or a production system or a value chain to accept different types of inputs that may be different along the year, for example? Because when we talk about the circularity, we cannot guarantee, because if you buy from a specific supplier a product that is developed for me, I can guarantee that, or at least I should have a constant delivery of products. But if we are talking about circularity, and if we are dependent from other industries, if we are dependent from the value chain, we have a problem of variability of the demand. So how my production system can be resilient to accept, when it is available, material that is recycled or material that is not recycled, and I need to buy from specific sources. So so these numbers can be dynamic along the time, but what we need is resilience to this variability, and be able to adapt to the circumstances.
Resilience, which also implies incredible flexibility, obviously, if you're dealing with sort of modulating flows of material. Jonut.
Yeah, there's a word I heard in connection to circularity, which is persistence, not resilience, which is interesting, like the capacity of materials to come back again and again. And obviously they might decrease in their contribution to future products. Yeah, but persistence, the capacity to come back. But a way to solve this, it seemed simple in my head initially, but then thinking about it and listening to you, it's maybe not that straightforward. But we can come up with a system like the energy classes, and because we cannot expect everyone to go full circular within a year, within 2 years. But then we can have categories like the energy class and say this is grade A because it manages to be 100% circular. But then I think it has a in-depth dimension, because it's also about how many times it can be circular with a product and how fast the cycle is. So there's layers to this. But I think we can go towards a system where we have this kind of standards and say, this is grade A, this is grade B, this is grade C. And Europe is the place where standards can be easily set up, and we're used to doing this. So I think there's an opportunity there to set up something like this, which helps consumers understand difference between one product and the other.
Between recycling and
which one is more circular than the other, and if he wants to support that, go for the more circular one, and that will become part of the portfolio of reasons to buy into things in the future.
You say Europe is a place where recycling, where we have these kinds of abilities to have standards, but given the challenges that we're facing with recycling, to come back to the word that you weren't very happy about, how feasible is it to establish standards for a circular economy value change?
We're good bureaucrats in Europe, so we can do that. I'm not worried about that.
You're not worried about that part.
I'm not worried about that, and I think we can deliver something that the rest of the world can follow, if we do it fast enough.
Absolutely, that would be the key. Okay, thank you very much, Jonut, for that comment. And I've got another question here from Anna Baros. What percentage of chips do we reuse, recycle? There's a question for the room. Oh my, okay. Peter Krajnik.
All right, I can take this one. I mean, this depends on the end user, right? But in high-end automotive, it's 100%, right? So let's say you have in the products that are sometimes consumed doomed, like an engine block, right? I mean, yes, the chips would be collected and they would go back to the foundry and they would be 100% recirculated, right? And recycled. And then the tools that are used to produce these chips are also they end up in some sort of recycling as well. So that's pretty positive in the metal cutting business, that both chips and tools are not getting lost, right?
Thank you.
But let's not go into details.
Thanks for that answer, though, and that's also good news, I guess, on the scale of good and bad news. Another question here from Walid, who has the question: what indicators can be used to evaluate the success of these circular and local manufacturing models? Jonat, you talked about benchmarking. Is that kind of getting into the same?
He's zooming in now with
Yeah.
questions because
Yeah.
he had some other questions before. Obviously, there's a certain methodology that needs to be set up. In order to do benchmarking, you need to have some scenarios and test and understand which indicators work and which indicators don't work. But obviously, when talking about circularity, I think it has to do with this persistence, how many times it has been reintegrated in the product, or how many times it can be reintegrated, and you have to measure that somehow in a neutral way in order to get it standardized. So it's going to get complex, not complicated. And then local, I think that has to do with maybe the concept of the autarky, so the radius within which a certain product can be produced. I think we need to do some experimentation in order to have measurements that we can compare with one another. I think there's this kind of a research approach that we need to do. I don't have the answers. I just know that it's something we can do, and we just need to start measuring and comparing and seeing what works, what has lesser footprint, what helps, what doesn't help, what can be profitable, and then keep the good things. I think it's this the lean approach that we actually need to do, and you're doing a project with lean in the middle. So yeah, let's do that.
Speaking of lean, in lean times, obviously the freedom to experiment is a little bit more difficult now when we're dealing with shortages and high costs. So EIT manufacturing stepping in there to bring a lot of these projects along. Thank you very much to our activity leaders for being here to contribute and to tell us where they stand. Are there any final remarks from our panelists before I turn to Klaus and we can close the day? Antonio?
One, and of course I don't have an answer for that, but I think that also what needs to change is the way how we as a customer or as a customer see the market and buy the products. I think that somehow maybe aligned with the crisis that we have, the cost of the energy, the cost of to transport goods. Maybe we have been taught, or we have been in a world where we buy something very cheap, where you look into the prices, and I think that this vision, the way how we are, let's say, buying things, the way how we look into the products, maybe also need to change. So we talk a lot about manufacturing, we talk about value chains, but also I think that there should be, from the customer side, some changes in the paradigms that need to be worked, in my perspective, in order to make some of the topics that we mentioned here today, that is profitability and so on. Of course, it will always be a problem, but maybe it's a problem more today with our mindset and our paradigm. So I think that's also something to discuss in the future, how to change the customer mindset about how they see products and how they see products life cycle.
Thanks very much. Igor, any final words from you?
Yes, perhaps to add one thing, which is also very important. I've been yesterday by one company. It was a big, huge company in times of Yugoslavia, Iskra, electronic industry and everything. After the collapse of the market and the whole company split to small companies. And yesterday I came to the office of one of these smaller companies, and they said, we would like to come together, to work together, to be stronger, to cooperate, to get the knowledge from universities. Again, I think it's very, very good. And this is also one of the topics by EIT Manufacturing, networking, cooperation. And I saw on a real example in Slovenia that these companies want to come again together to be better, to be more competitive by the larger project and so on. And I saw this as a very good message for the future of the manufacturing industry in our part of Europe.
Thanks very much. Jono, do you have anything to add or final word? No?
I like the way he presents and explains things. So I'm always fascinated when he presents. I was very glad to hear him.
It's like story time.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
exactly. Thank you.
Blanca?
I like the two final remarks of putting the focus now again on working together, all these networking opportunities, and we can build this future together. And then, of course, I think like it was not the discussion today, but how we need to switch the customer mindset. So at the end, you know, we need this market uptake from them to really push the manufacturing industries and so on back in the value chain to transition to really a circular economy.
Okay, well, great steps being taken, and we've had a lot of really interesting concepts also brought into the room, new ideas, living labs, new paradigms that need to sort of be brought forward, but are very, very healthily on their way, let's put it that way. And it's time to close this discussion. I'd like to thank all of my panelists here on stage. If you could just stay with me up here, and we will go to Klaus, but Jono Tata, Igor Kovac, and Blanca Chokara, and Antonio Almeida, thank you very much for being with us. And we can give them a round of applause. It was wonderful to have their insights. Thanks also to our activity leaders. And I'm going to see if we can go over to Klaus to close the day. Give them a round of applause. It was wonderful to have their insights. I think we did have some kind of a digital banner that we wanted to bring in there. Are we good?
Hello, Karen. I can start?
I can hear you, Klaus. I can't see you yet. There you are. Wonderful.
Here I am.
Okay, so I have to turn. I've got only one screen that's showing you, but that's okay. Klaus, I know you've been watching from Paris and probably fitting us in between all of the other busy things that you have to do. You've heard a lot of it, I'm sure. You've heard about the fact that we need to be redesigning intellectual property. Living labs have come up as an idea for sort of the sandbox place to be experimenting a lot of the models, the new business models that have been sort of put on the table. Industrial symbiosis, another very, very interesting idea, and what needs to be happening between value chains. What are your takeaways and learnings from day one? What did you find the most intriguing today and the most helpful?
Yeah, first of all, I'm still very excited by the discussion we had today, and a big thank you to all the participants on the panel, but also from the auditorium in the room and from the people remote with all their questions. So I'm still quite excited. I mean, what brings us forward is really the debate. And I'm always keen to learn from new approaches, from successful examples, and get stimulated by the thoughts of others. Yeah. And today I got a lot of stimulation to think about over the next days and weeks. Yeah. So I think we had two very, very intensive roundtables, and we discussed key topics for manufacturing companies in Europe in adapting sustainable practices. Starting with energy consumption, CO2 reduction, with the digitalization in management, in manufacturing skills, also quite an important and quite important topic for digitalization, for circular economy. Also the zero additive manufacturing, the personalization in manufacturing. Then all the debate about the terms remanufacturing, refurbishing, waste reduction, waste elimination. Yeah. Also, very importantly, the role of smart products, yeah, And what I liked also very much, we talked about the environmental and societal impact, because this is not only about manufacturing and our economy, this is about our societies. And manufacturing is still the core of our welfare and of our prosperities. So when it comes to what we produce, how we produce, and who produces, yeah, so this is very, very important, was very important in the discussion, and I liked it very much. But importantly, and this is my main takeaway, the change of the paradigm can only happen with collaboration and development of trust in manufacturing value chains. And this is the way to bring really the sustainability into the cost and quality driven manufacturing. And we as an innovation community, we clearly see our role to help facilitating these collaborations and the new partnerships, establishing new partnerships within our ecosystem. And this will be our goal for the next couple of years, to really facilitate this needed collaborations. So this is really my takeaway for today. And I'm also would like to look a little bit ahead for tomorrow, because we have there 2 grand finals from 2 of our amazing EIT manufacturing initiatives in front of us. In the morning, we will have the risk leaders with 6 women innovators pitching their solutions with a strong societal, environmental, and financial impact. And then we have the final of our teaching and factories competition. And this is our lighthouse project promoting the academia and business collaborations. All in all, I'm really looking forward to amazing finalists and amazing ideas tomorrow. So stay tuned, enjoy the evening, and I hope I see you all tomorrow again. Thank you.
Thanks very much to you, Klaus, for that great overview. The RISC Leaders Competition, obviously one that we had a fantastic edition of that last year, coming from Berlin, and the Teaching Factories, which are new this year, and we look forward to that tomorrow. And I invite all of you, all of our audience here in the studio, but all of our virtual guests, thank you very much for your participation and for those excellent questions. And I invite you all to get a good rest, of course, and tune in tomorrow for those competitions. We'll see you here at 10 o'clock sharp. We'll be taking off again with our opening video for the Regional Innovation Scheme Leaders and Teaching Factories Grand Finals. Until then, from Klaus, myself, and from all of the participants here in the room at the EIT Summit, Manufacturing Summit 2022, all the best to you. Have a lovely evening, and à demain. Bye-bye.